Hi, it's Milton Kane, Christian Democratic Party candidate for the federal seat of Newcastle. Today, the Prime Minister, the current one that is, came to Newcastle to launch disability care, a national program. It's a result of what's called the National Disability Insurance Scheme. I am very pleased, in fact, that there is a good national approach to dealing with disability services. But one of my biggest problems is that it seems to be, from what I understand about the program, potentially for the federal government to actually take charge of all of disability services. And that does concern me. Disability services have been delivered quite successfully in many ways by the state governments. There has been at different levels because different states have got different funding arrangements and different amounts of money available. And it would be good to have a national funding scheme so that in fact services will be able to increase. Those things which are not in one state will be able to be perhaps done in another. Maybe at this particular point in time they cannot be afforded by the states. Now, we only have this program 60% funded. That's the first point that we've got to take note of. There is no reference being made to where the other 40% is coming from, and that's of serious concern to me. It is important to me that the management of the day-to-day affairs occur at the closest level to the disabled person that there is. And that's vitally important. Unfortunately, the program, as it has been rolled out, we've never been told what's ruled in and what's ruled out. Being an insurance scheme, we need to be very careful on what is ruled in and what's ruled out. We note that 65-year-olds are considered not to be disabled under this program because they're excluded. And yet the disability happens to occur to people at this particular age. Obviously some of these people will be able to receive their services through aged care, but will that be sufficient funds in there to treat them as equal? Will a person with disability services who is 64 years of age suddenly find on his birthday that he wishes his birthday didn't occur because he's got less services because he's suddenly turned 65? There are many issues which are there which are still left unanswered. It seems to me if you're going to launch a program, what you need to do is to make sure you know what you're doing. It seems that much of what is happening is not really considered. We don't even know how the estimates are on what it's going to cost, on how accurate that might be. Because the problem that we do face, we have a government of a history of determining what a price structure is going to be, an income structure is going to be as well. And we find that they are nowhere near the mark. We can look at two things. For example, we can look at the mining tax, the money which the government believed and predicted that it would receive from the mining tax was up in the millions of dollars. And yet they received very little. It actually cost almost more money to actually administer the mining tax in the first 12 months of operation than what they received. And yet it was budgeted for quite a large windfall. Of course, this was blamed for part of the reason for the budget shortfall. Interesting. And on the expenditure side, we have the NBN. In fact, the NBN is such a problem that we don't even know what it's going to precisely cost. We have some rough estimates, but those have been jacking up all of the time. We can't be sure of exactly what it's going to cost. When you're running to a budget, then obviously what you've got to do, you've got to assess on how much money it's going to cost for each and every aspect of that program. There are some aspects of the program of the disability services, even at this present stage, which I have difficulties with, and I would like to relate some of them. Some of the issues are, for example, under the disability program, some disabled people can apply for and receive assistance to go to various venues. They get a carer going with them, perhaps to a movie, to shopping or whatever else, so they're able to do something where they can actually go within the community. They may receive 2 hours of approved care. What that actually means is that a carer is paid for 2 hours' work. It doesn't mean that the client will get 2 hours worth of attention from the social worker. What it actually means, the social worker will rock up to wherever they sign on. They'll sign on to the job. They'll get from that place to the location to where the disabled person is. Once they get there, then they will ready that particular disabled person for their outing. Then they will go and they will find a means of transport. It may well be a taxi. Sometimes I've taken them in my taxi. It may be some other source of transport. They will take them to the destination. They need to return them back to the place to give them sufficient time to be able to sign off within that 2-hour framework. So 2 hours allocated care of going to perhaps a shopping centre or wherever can actually be reduced down to where they actually are away from their place for less than an hour. These are concerns to me. If you're going to grant the person 2 hours of assistance to be able to go to a shopping centre or to maybe a bit more time to go to a movie or whatever, there needs to be adequate time for them to go there and to be at the place. It may cost a bit more money for the carer to rock up, but that should not be a part of the disabled person's responsibility. What happens if, for example, the disabled person lives in a place where the carer lives some distance away or signs on some distance away? We may well have the strange situation where, for example, a 2 hours care may well mean that the disabled person ends up getting into a vehicle, going almost to a shopping centre and then having to return. No, I don't think it is very well managed. Some of the things are not very well thought out and managed. They look good on paper, but realistically, to deliver care to people with disabilities, what you really do need to do is to make sure that you're there, facing the issues, you're there right on time, right on the target. You know what people are doing, you know how it works. It would not be right to be able to make the claim that a person has had 2 hours of care if in fact over an hour of that is the sign-on, sign-off, arrival and return to the sign-off destination. That would not be right. To me, it's not moral. The care given should not be to make sure that the carer is well and truly paid. I'm not suggesting they shouldn't get their money. But if you're going to give 2 hours of care, give 2 hours of care. If it costs more money to administer the 2 hours of care, so be it. Pay it accordingly. But don't shortchange the disabled person. They already have enough difficulties in life. They have enough problems already to occur. And that's a problem. I know of disabled people who, because they've gone out to a place and for some reason or other they've been held up. And sometimes that hold up could be purely and simply a traffic issue. It could be that the event they went to went a bit longer and they need assistance to get into bed. They need assistance for whatever. And they have already had a pre-arrangement about a carer being there to assist them with that. And what happens? You didn't arrive on time and so I left. And so the person is left without that care. Now you see, there are many things that aren't going right already at the moment. And they need to be addressed. But the issue is, under a national managed scheme, are these things going to work out better for the disabled? I don't think so. What needs to happen there needs to be funding for sure, a vehicle of funding. And a federal scheme to raise that money would be a good thing. That money needs to be made sure that it is paid directly to people doing the help, doing the assistance. The person who needs the care needs to have a significant say if they're capable of it. But it needs to be made sure that the bulk of the money is spent on actually giving care to the disabled, and not on transporting people to and from the places to give the care. We need to make sure that we are really delivering real care and not just making sure that more people are employed in the caring industry. One of my big issues that I raised a question with the former Prime Minister, Julia Gillard. I raised concerns about how many people would be employed in the overseeing management body of this scheme that were disabled. By the way, the response I got, people were not really impressed with the fact that I should ask a question. They did not believe that a disabled person could actually so manage such an organisation. We often forget that disabled people have done wonderful feats in this country. We know that people have done wonderful feats, and we may forget them in other parts of the world. A United States President, right smack in the middle of Second World War, from his wheelchair and his polio-affected body, was capable of leading the United States into the war, through the war, and assisting the Allies in a victory of that war. He had many programs, lend-lease programs and all these things where he would lend material, equipment to the British to help them, so that because he couldn't get approval through the American Parliament for them to be able to go and become involved in the war. Many things happened from this great man, an American president in a wheelchair, fully disabled, with polio, fully capable of doing the job, not just with a limp. A man who in such a strong way wanted to walk, and it was with gross difficulty that he used 2 sticks to walk a few short feet, because he wanted to be proud of what he did. One of the big things about the people who have disabilities, sometimes the struggle that they go through to be able to do what they do, as simple as getting into a wheelchair by themselves, even though it would be far easier for an able-bodied person to pick them up and put them into the chair, that struggle they go through by themselves is so strong and powerful, because it helps them, helps them to formulate in their mind their self-worth and self-value. We who are able-bodied often complain about a sore toe. Some, depending upon the type of disability, some of the disabled wish they could feel that toe to be sore. And yet they will drag them through such difficult circumstances to have a few things which they're capable of doing, simply because they want to keep expanding their capacity to do things. In the management of this disability service, we need to have the input at the highest level possible from people with disabilities, so that they will see that the real service is given, not that money flows. We cannot evaluate this program, whether it's successful or not, on how much money is spent. We are not about Evita. We're about real life people. How we can determine if this program will work and work well is if the people with disabilities are receiving an increased amount of care, and they're being adequately cared for. Will we be able to achieve it? I hope so. Thank you.